Hey folks, if you grew up in the 1970s or the 1980s, you definitely remember Crazy Eddie. In fact, you probably bought your first stereo or your first Walkman from there. And if you don't remember Crazy Eddie's, I'm sure you remember Crazy Eddie's commercials like this one.
Eddie's greatest microwave oven sale ever. Crazy Eddie's out to burn the competition with the guaranteed lowest prices on microwave ovens. All the best brands, Toshiba, GE, Sharp. Get yours now because Crazy Eddie's microwave oven sale is going on right now with prices so low he's practically giving microwave ovens away. Shop around, get all the lowest sale prices you can find, then go to Crazy Eddie and he'll beat them. So get a microwave oven. Get it now during Crazy Eddie's greatest microwave oven sale ever. Crazy Eddie, his prices are insane. Chicken not included.
But what is the real story of Crazy Eddie? I mean, one guy buys a store in 1969, takes the chain all the way up to 39 stores, and yet somehow goes into prison. But what happened? What is the real story of Crazy Eddie? Well, the story starts way back in 1969 when Crazy Eddie bought his very first store. The store was called Sights and Sounds, but soon after, his first wife was talking to someone who had gone to that store where Eddie was working, and someone said, "Hey, I went down to that store and I got some great bargains there from some crazy guy named Eddie." So Eddie heard the story, and there it was born. The name Crazy Eddie was started at that very, very point. Many folks thought that the guy in the commercial, Jerry Carroll, who's actually a professional DJ, was Crazy Eddie. But in reality, this is Crazy Eddie right here, Eddie Antar, born in Brooklyn, along with his famous cousin, Sam Antar, who really loved Eddie. They grew up together. They learned the culture together, but they were two crooked guys. And actually, Eddie gave him his first job in 1969. And then what he did was he sent Sam Antar, his cousin, to accountant school to learn how to cook the books and be the best rip-off guy that possibly could be. Together, their scams were legendary. I mean, look, folks, this was back in the 1970s. People always did these crazy kind of things, but these guys took it to a whole new level. They took one store and they brought it all the way up to 39 stores. And what they were doing was every time they made a sale, they encouraged a cash sale. And one out of every 5 sales or 2 out of every 5 sales, they would actually keep the cash, rip up the receipt, give the customer their receipt, and they would pocket the money. It's called skimming. And they did it over and over and over again. In fact, they did it so much that they had money lying all over the place. In mattresses, in file cabinets, you name it, there was money. In fact, they had so much money, they started bringing it to Israel in wads of cash taped to their body. What they would do is deposit in Israeli bank accounts. Then they would move it over to Panama, then send it back over to the United States. They even nicknamed it the Panama Bump. And through the Panama Bump, they became very, very rich. And in the process, hurting lots of people along the way. As many of you know, I grew up in Park Slope, so the Crazy Eddie that I went to was the one on Avenue U and Kings Highway. This is a vintage picture of that Crazy Eddie store on Avenue U and Kings Highway, and rather on Coney Island Avenue. And boy, let me tell you folks, I spent many a day going there, going with my brother and my sister and my mom and my dad. And it was, like I said, folks, it was legendary. But what people didn't really know was all the scams that were going on. I mean, it was very commonplace for Eddie to sell old TVs, broken TVs. He was a master. He would put the television into a new box or into an envelope and heat seal it, and people all assumed they were getting a new TV, when meanwhile, it was an old recycled TV. It went on and on and on, and the skimming and the money laundering went on and on and on for many, many years, until in 1984, it got to be so big that the company went public. And when the company went public, this was the beginning of their downfall. Because what happened was, it was actually taken over by a guy named Victor Palmieri. And when Victor Palmieri took it over, obviously the first thing he did was he did an inventory. And after 20 days, he realized there was tons of money missing, tons of merchandise missing. Because again, this was going on for years and years and years. I mean, people said nobody had more fires than Eddie. Nobody had more floods than Eddie. He was the epitome of a scammer. And oftentimes what they would do when the accountants came in or when the auditors came in, they would turn around and they would put empty boxes in the warehouse. They would get the young accountant in and they'd put a pretty girl with him and she would distract them. They would change the numbers actually on the books. It was incredible what they did. And like I said, it wasn't until the company went public and it was actually purchased that the real situation got to the point where they couldn't control it anymore. And when Victor Palmieri found out what was going on, he called in the FCC, the FBI, the Postal Service, and they all came down on Eddie like a ton of bricks. So what do you think Eddie did? Well, what did Eddie do? Eddie took all the money he could and he ran off to Israel, where he was a fugitive for a couple of years. And that's where he stayed. And guess who got to face the music? That's right, you guessed it, the accountant. And can you believe, you'll never believe what Sam did. He turned state's evidence against Eddie. Surprise, surprise, surprise. So obviously he was charged, but he didn't spend any time. And what he did was he laid out the entire operation. And it took a while, but sure enough, Eddie was captured. This is actually a wanted poster that they had put out for him. You could see place of birth, Brooklyn, born December 18th, 1947. This was actually the wanted poster that was put out by the United States Marshal Service. And they found Eddie over in Israel and they arrested him. Sure enough, Israel extradited him. And here's a picture of Eddie being arrested and brought to court right here after being convicted. If you're wondering, what is corporate financial fraud? Management's intentional misrepresentation of financial statements for the purpose of obtaining an internal objective. Greed. It always comes down to greed. So after 7 years in prison and 2 years being a fugitive and 3 years probation, Eddie came out, of course, and didn't really amount to too much. He didn't really do much. He ended up passing away in 2016, on September 11, 2016 in New Jersey, while his cousin went on to become very, very successful and is still very, very successful. Now accounting firms hire him. The FBI hires him. He teaches classes because, hey, he was the accountant for, as people called it, the Darth Vader of capitalism, Eddie Antar. I mean, what could you say? It was a crazy, crazy story. Truth is stranger than fiction. I mean, after all, Eddie was one of the first people to bring us a Christmas sale in the middle of August. Who could forget that? So, folks, thank you for joining me. I'm going to leave you with another Crazy Eddie commercial clip. I hope you enjoyed it. Please drop me a shout or a like and enjoy the clip, and I'll see you real soon on the next video.
Crazy Eddie Christmas in August audio blowout blitz. Crazy Eddie's going to save you a blizzard of bucks on stereo rack systems, compact disc players, portable stereos, speakers, turntables, receivers, anything and everything in audio's on sale now. Remember, we are not undersold. We will not be undersold. We cannot be undersold, and we mean it. It's a Crazy Eddie Christmas in August audio blowout blitz. Get anything and everything in audio on sale now. Crazy Eddie, his prices are, take that, insane.